What if unexpected love arose from a simple contract? When Valentina accepted an unusual agreement to pretend to be engaged to Tomas, a powerful and mysterious businessman, she had no idea that their lives would change forever. Between tense encounters and silent secrets, they discovered a connection that went beyond any contract. Now, with every choice and gesture, they both face a journey of real love, where the barriers of the agreement dissolve and the heart takes control. Valentina gets up in the small room where she lives, with the first light of day coming through the thin curtains and brightening the modest room. Around her, the simple, almost empty space contrasts with the vision she imagined she would have when she moved to Seville. But everything there represents the effort and choices she had to make to support her family. She changes her pajamas for her uniform with the attention of someone who knows that working in one of the city's most luxurious hotels requires care. In the mirror, she sees the traces of tiredness around her eyes, but soon remembers the reason that brought her here, to build a more dignified life for her parents and younger siblings. She fixes her hair, adjusts her uniform, and puts a photo of her family in her pocket before leaving. In the streets, tourists and locals are already crowding the sidewalks. She avoids looking in shop windows and concentrates on getting to work, where she knows every minute is precious. As she passes the hotel entrance, she notices the stark difference between her world and that of the people who frequent it. The huge lobby, the works of art, the crystal chandeliers, everything makes her feel like an observer, an outsider. However, she undertakes to face her work with the same dignity as always, remembering the purpose that keeps her there. That evening, an important reception takes place in the main hall. Businessmen, celebrities, and local authorities are gathering for a lavish event, and Valentina has to serve drinks to the guests. The hall fills with animated conversation and laughter as she passes people with a tray full of glasses, dodging the guests in the midst of the sophisticated atmosphere. She observes the jewels sparkling under the spotlights, the glint in their eyes, and the excessive formality that defines these interactions. Valentina feels the contrast with her own reality as a constant presence, something that challenges her to stay focused without letting it get to her. As she moves along, a lady passes her wearing a diamond necklace, apparently oblivious to the value she's carrying around her neck. Valentina feels a mixture of irony and resignation. For the rich, the event is just another night of celebration. For her, it's an opportunity to make ends meet for the month and send help to her family in the countryside. Luxury for some, struggle for others, she thinks, as she adjusts the tray and moves on. Suddenly, as Valentina tries to dodge a group of people crowding around a table, she doesn't notice the man standing in her way. The tray unbalances, and the glasses slip and fall to the floor, with the sound of breaking glass interrupting the buzz in the room. She quickly bends down to pick up the shards, but before she can gather everything up, a pair of thin shoes appears in front of her. She looks up to see a tall man with a stern expression, dressed impeccably in a dark suit. "Are you paying attention to what you're doing?" he asks in a calm but authoritative voice. Valentina feels her face heat up, but decides to answer respectfully, without lowering her gaze. "I apologize for the incident," she says, trying to keep her voice calm. The man arches an eyebrow, and a slight smile of disapproval appears on his face. He seems to inspect her every detail before replying. "Incidents happen when we're distracted. I think you know what I mean," he says, keeping his tone cool. Without waiting for an answer, he walks away, leaving Valentina alone amidst the scattered shards. She takes a deep breath, her heart racing, and resumes her task of picking up the pieces of glass. That man's expression, his penetrating gaze and impeccable posture remain in her mind as she moves into the kitchen. His words echo like a criticism, but they also arouse a curiosity that she tries to ignore. At the end of her shift, as she changes out of her uniform and into the shabby jacket she's wearing to go out, Valentina reflects on what happened. The image of the mysterious man she bumped into in the hall, the way he stared at her, and the firmness of his words occupy her mind, even as she tries to push the thought away. On the walk back to her apartment, she relives every detail of that brief but remarkable encounter. The next morning, Valentina prepares for another shift at the hotel, trying to forget the previous night's episode. She adjusts her uniform and fixes her hair, determined to put the incident behind her. When she arrives in the lobby, one of her colleagues informs her that a man is waiting for her at reception. Confused, she goes there, imagining that it's a customer who needs help. However, when she gets closer, she sees the same man from the night before, now watching her with the same impenetrable gaze. "I need a few minutes of your time. The subject is of mutual interest," he says, in a tone that doesn't allow for refusal. Valentina, surprised, follows him to a private lounge in the corner of the room. Taking a seat opposite her, he introduces himself. "My name is Tomas Castellar. I need someone for a specific appointment, and I think you can meet my needs." Valentina looks at him, not understanding exactly what he is suggesting. "I'd like you to pose as my fiancé at a family event. Something temporary and absolutely discreet. Of course, the compensation will be fair, appropriate to the level of professionalism I expect," he explains, keeping his gaze fixed on hers. Valentina processes the proposal, surprised by the unusual request. At the same time, the idea of an advantageous financial offer piques her interest. The situation seems absurd, but the seriousness with which he conducts the conversation makes her consider the possibility. "Why me?" she asks, still not understanding his choice. Tomas gives her a restrained smile before answering. "Precisely because I'm not related to my circle. I need someone who can keep a low profile, someone from the outside." Valentina reflects, thinking about the impact the extra money would have on her family. However, the strangeness of the situation persists. "I'll give you the answer tomorrow," she decides, determined to weigh up her decision. Tomas watches her for a moment before agreeing, "I'll be waiting." The next morning, Valentina reflects on Tomas's proposal, weighing up the impact this decision will have on her life. The promise of significant financial compensation motivates her, but the unusual nature of the request makes her insecure. Over breakfast, she thinks about her family and the benefits the money could bring. With her mind made up, she takes the card he has given her and drives to the address indicated, determined to accept. When she arrives, a driver takes her to the entrance of the mansion, where Tomas greets her with a nod. He watches her in silence, and she realizes that his gaze carries an almost meticulous analysis. "I see you've decided to accept," he says without changing his formal tone. Valentina nods, trying not to show her nervousness. "If everything is as you proposed, I'm ready to go ahead with the deal." Tomas leads her into a private room and begins to explain the details. The presentation event as his fiancée requires impeccable posture and a series of specific behaviors that he describes precisely. He talks about the etiquette required, the people they will meet, and above all, the importance of a convincing image in front of family and partners. "The point here is to gain the trust of my partners and close relatives. If any detail is missed, everything is compromised," he explains, watching Valentina's reaction. She nods, absorbing his instructions. She knows that his every word carries a weight that she can't underestimate, and she decides to show all the necessary dedication. When he has finished his instructions, he takes her to a fitting room, where an elegant dress awaits her. Valentina stares at her reflection in the mirror, hardly recognizing her own image. The dress gives her a sophisticated appearance and, for the first time, she experiences the contrast between her usual life and Tomas's environment. When she returns to the salon, Tomas is waiting for her. He looks at her for a moment, as if evaluating the result of the production before offering a slight smile of approval. Perfect. Now we need to rehearse our interaction. Valentina nods, aware of the importance of every detail. Tomas instructs her to link her arm with his, to adopt a discreet smile, and to hold a firm gaze when someone approaches them. Little by little, she adapts to the role, following the instructions with the determination of someone who knows that this moment represents more than a simple act. Soon, the event begins. Guests in exquisite attire and discreet but valuable jewelry begin to fill the hall. Tomas keeps Valentina by his side and introduces her to each person with a firmness that makes the interaction natural. She accompanies him with a serene smile, attentive to the tone of the conversations and the glances that surround them. In the middle of the presentation, an imposing-looking man approaches and greets Tomas with a firm handshake. The critical look he casts at Valentina reveals a somewhat incisive curiosity. "So, Tomas, is this your fiancé?" he asks, with a tone that hints at doubt. Tomas replies with the naturalness of someone in control of the situation. "Yes, Valentina, meet César, one of the group's main investors," he says, with a smile that conveys security. Valentina extends her hand to César and greets him with the posture they have rehearsed. Despite his scrutiny, she remains serene. César observes their interaction, but soon moves on with the conversation, accepting the introduction without further question. As the evening progresses, Valentina feels more comfortable in the role. Tomas leads her through the hall, always with the same impeccable posture. They circulate among the guests, and although some family members show subtle skepticism, most seem convinced by the presentation. Valentina stands firm, responding to the stares with confidence. At one point, while Tomas is talking to a group of associates, a familiar figure approaches. Mercedes, Tomas' grandmother, stares at Valentina with a penetrating gaze, and Valentina feels the intensity of that silent confrontation. Without looking away, Mercedes approaches, and a brief smile appears on her lips, without softening her analysis of Valentina. "So, Tomas, have you finally made the decision to stabilize yourself?" Mercedes asks, in a tone that mixes curiosity and irony. Tomas turns to his grandmother and replies with a slight inclination of his head. "Yes, Grandma, Valentina has been a great partner in everything," he says with a firm intonation. Valentina notices Mercedes's attempt to identify a flaw, but remains serene, aware that any hesitation could jeopardize the plan. Mercedes then turns her focus on her, as if testing her patience. "I hope you understand the responsibility that comes with this commitment. This family demands an impeccable attitude," Mercedes comments, as if to gauge Valentina's reaction. She takes a deep breath and replies calmly, "I understand perfectly, Mrs. Mercedes, and I pledge to do whatever it takes to make the best contribution." The answer seems to satisfy Mercedes, who nods slightly, although her incisive gaze remains. Thomas observes the exchange between the two with an expression of restrained approval, but soon resumes the conversation, leading Valentina away from her grandmother. As they walk away, he leans over and whispers, "You handled Mercedes very well. She rarely shows satisfaction with other people's decisions." Valentina responds with a brief smile, feeling a slight relief at having overcome the challenge. Mercedes' presence represents an additional obstacle, but knowing that she has faced the matriarch's gaze with serenity gives her a sense of victory. The night goes on, and Valentina adapts to her surroundings more naturally. She observes the way Tomas talks to the guests, studying his posture and the calculated answers he gives to each question. She realizes that for him, these interactions involve more than mere formality. There is an art to controlling each reaction, a skill he has developed over the years. At one point, Tomas leads her out onto a balcony where they can both breathe without the pressure of their gazes. The view of Seville, with its lights reflecting in the windows and bridges in the distance, offers her a moment of peace. Tomas remains by her side in silence, and Valentina takes advantage of the pause to reorganize her thoughts. "I never imagined that a simple event would require so much strategy," she comments, in a tone that mixes curiosity and tiredness. He smiles, observing the view before replying, "Every detail counts. These people look for any sign of weakness. A slip can mean questions and rumors." Valentina absorbs his words, understanding the weight he carries. As they return to the hall, the evening comes to an end, and they both thank the guests who begin to say goodbye. She feels a sense of relief and accomplishment, and Tomas escorts her out. "You've done an excellent job. I think we left a good impression," he says, offering a brief smile. Valentina thanks him, feeling that, despite the initial awkwardness, she is beginning to find her place alongside Tomas. The morning after the event, Valentina arrives at the mansion for another meeting with Tomas, determined to maintain the impeccable standard he demands. As she enters, an employee leads her into a large room where he is waiting for her, already standing and with his usual serious expression. He greets her with a nod and indicates a nearby seat while watching her with his usual attention to detail. "I want to reinforce our image in front of some family members and specific partners. We'll be at a few more events together, and for that I need you to stay as sharp as you were last night," he says, in a firm tone, but without leaving out a note of praise. Valentina nods, absorbing every word. She feels increasingly determined to exceed Tomas's expectations, especially now, after the restrained compliment he had offered. However, he soon warns her about Mercedes' presence at the evening's event, making it clear that her grandmother remains suspicious of their relationship. Upon hearing Mercedes' name, Valentina feels the weight of the situation, but decides to face the challenge head-on. During the rehearsal of interactions for the next event, Tomas demonstrates some situations that could arise and the expected responses. He approaches and, with a serious face, advises on specific gestures and looks that will reassure the others. At the end of the rehearsal, a slight smile appears on his face, suggesting silent satisfaction. When the event begins, Valentina and Tomas enter side by side, and immediately glances fall on them. She senses the tension in the room and feels the pressure to behave as naturally as she did at the rehearsal. Next to her, Tomas keeps his face calm and moves confidently, introducing her to some family members and investors with his usual firmness. In the midst of the greetings, Mercedes' imposing figure stands out in the hall. Tomas's grandmother approaches with slow steps, keeping her gaze fixed on her granddaughter and the bride accompanying him. Valentina lifts her chin and waits, aware that any hesitation could confirm Mercedes' suspicions. Tomas steps forward, greeting his grandmother with a kiss on the hand and reinforcing the image of security. "So, Valentina, you seem to be adapting to our circle," comments Mercedes, with an intonation that reveals a certain irony. Valentina maintains her posture and replies serenely, remembering Tomas's instructions. "Indeed, Mrs. Mercedes, I've learned a lot, especially from Tomas." Mercedes smiles almost imperceptibly, and Valentina notices a brief flash of approval. However, the matriarch doesn't move away, continuing to watch them as if trying to identify something beyond what is visible. Tomas remains by Valentina's side, as if his presence next to her were a protective barrier. "Adi, I hope you are aware of the expectations that this commitment demands," Mercedes insists, directing the question to Tomas, but with her gaze fixed on Valentina. Valentina holds the matriarch's gaze calmly, without showing any sign of hesitation. Tomas answers his grandmother firmly, Mercedes, Valentina and I understand the seriousness of the situation. There's no need to worry. Mercedes nods, but her eyes continue to follow Valentina's every move. When her grandmother finally leaves, Tomas gives Valentina a look of approval, as if to acknowledge that she has passed an important test. Valentina breathes a sigh of relief, feeling that she has gained a little respect in the room, even if the pressure hasn't completely dissipated. She has maintained a firm posture. Mercedes doesn't usually show approval, but you managed to get around it well, comments Tomas in a low voice as they continue to walk around the room. Her confidence grows as the evening progresses, and Valentina begins to adapt better to the role she is playing alongside him. She notices that some curious eyes follow their every move, but she remains focused, remembering the instructions he had given her. At one point, one of the investors, Mr. Avila, a man with grey hair and a haughty posture, approaches and greets Tomas with a firm handshake. "Tomas, it's always a pleasure to see you. And I see you've brought some lovely company," says Mr. Avila, giving Valentina an analytical look. Tomas responds with a restrained smile, making it clear that Valentina is part of his life. "Mr. Avila, this is Valentina. We've been together for a while, and tonight is an opportunity to introduce her to the family circle," he explains, with an expression of tranquility. Valentina extends her hand to Mr. Avila, who looks at her for a moment before returning the greeting. The man seems satisfied with the introduction, but looks at her intensely, as if trying to understand more about the woman next to Tomas. After the brief encounter, Valentina feels relieved to have gotten through yet another successful interaction. Tomas takes her to a more secluded corner of the room, where they can both talk away from inquisitive eyes. He discreetly compliments her on her performance, commenting that her dedication has made everything easier than he expected. She thanks him, feeling more at ease at his side, as if with each event the connection between them deepens. The evening goes on, and the two of them keep up the act perfectly, interacting with the guests and answering subtle questions that hint at curiosity. Valentina realizes that alongside Tomas, she has learned to deal with the demanding environment and has gradually acquired the confidence to face situations without hesitation. At one point, Tomas invites her to a toast and leads her to a table near the balcony. There, away from the crowd, they take the opportunity to relax. He raises his glass and proposes a toast with a slight smile, which breaks the formality of the moment. "To our successful partnership," he says, keeping his gaze fixed on hers. Valentina returns the toast and smiles, feeling a lightness she hadn't noticed before. The atmosphere around her seems to dissolve, and she allows herself to let her guard down for a moment. Tomas watches her face, and a meaningful silence arises between them, as if they both recognize a connection that is gradually growing. After the toast, they both remain silent, watching the movement in the hall. Valentina notices that Tomas's gestures have softened, and his rigid posture is giving way to a more relaxed expression. He finally looks away from the room and turns to her. "Damned! The presence of someone with your dedication makes this whole process less arduous," he admits, with a sincerity that surprises her. Valentina feels her cheeks heat up, but she responds with a light smile, aware that this moment represents something beyond the facade of the contract. Tomas, for his part, shows an almost contemplative expression, as if reflecting on the impact of this relationship. As the evening draws to a close, they both return to the salon, greeting the last of the guests. Valentina feels a mixture of tiredness and fulfillment, but something inside her remains restless. Together with Tomas, she begins to realize that their commitment goes beyond the limitations of the initial contract. As the salon empties, Tomas accompanies her to the exit, where they exchange one last look of complicity. She thanks him for another successful evening, and he nods with a discreet smile. He's becoming indispensable for all of this. Valentina arrives at Tomas's mansion the following afternoon, not knowing exactly what to expect. He had invited her to a more intimate family gathering, an occasion where few would be present and where, as he had explained earlier, her role would require a deeper connection and more spontaneous gestures. She had prepared carefully, remembering every detail that Thomas had reinforced. When she arrived, a member of staff led her to the garden, where a private area had been set up for the meeting. Tomas is waiting for her next to a finely decorated table, and when he sees her, he nods with a restrained smile. Valentina notices his more relaxed posture and decides to remain confident, although she realizes that the evening's interactions will be even more challenging, since the proximity will allow for even more detailed observations. As she approaches, Tomas welcomes her with a gentle handshake, and they exchange a look of silent complicity. "I want you to feel at ease today. This meeting will be less formal, but everyone here will analyze the way we relate to each other," he explains in a calm tone. Valentina nods in agreement, feeling the importance of the occasion. Little by little, the family members begin to arrive, taking their seats around the table and exchanging formal greetings. She recognizes some of the faces from previous events, but notices that the more informal atmosphere reveals different traits in each person. Next to Tomas, Valentina tries to convey naturalness and at the same time the discreet affection he expects from her. When everyone has settled down, Tomas's grandmother, Mercedes, takes her place next to him, casting a deep analytical look at Valentina. In a controlled tone, Mercedes asks seemingly light questions, but loaded with intent, as if she wants to discover something beyond the surface. "And you, Valentina, how do you see your future with someone like Tomas?" she asks, with a slight smile that almost hides her provocation. Valentina knows that the answer needs to be careful and convincing at the same time. "Mrs. Mercedes, I believe that a future with someone like Tomas requires commitment, and I don't know any other way than to dedicate myself with sincerity and respect," she replies, keeping her gaze steady. Mercedes watches her for a few seconds before nodding with a slight smile of approval. Next to her, Tomas holds Valentina's hand for a moment, a gesture she feels as a silent encouragement. The other family members continue their conversations, but Valentina notices that Mercedes doesn't look away completely, as if she is still evaluating every gesture. As time passes, Tomas takes her for a walk in the garden. The meeting continues without them, and he seems to take advantage of the moment to allow them both to relax a little. With each step, Valentina feels more at ease next to him, and the conversation between them flows with a lightness that surprises them both. "I've noticed how easily you adapt. Dealing with my grandmother takes skill, and you've done very well," comments Tomas with a slight smile. Valentina thanks him, feeling that Tomas's compliments reflect genuine approval. They both stop in front of a fountain, where the sound of the water seems to envelop the conversation in an atmosphere of tranquility. He watches her, as if trying to decipher every detail of what is going on in her mind. "You know, I never imagined that this contract could bring about such a real connection. Sometimes I feel that all this is beyond what I imagined," he admits, in a tone that reveals an unexpected sincerity. Valentina, touched by his words, feels a closeness that grows with every moment. The tension between them intensifies, and she realizes that the role of bride for hire is becoming more real than she thought. Tomas' gaze conveys something beyond formality, and she hesitates, but decides to ask, "What do you expect for yourself, Tomas? Beyond the demands of your family, your business, what do you really want?" He reflects for a few moments, looking up at the sky before answering. "I think what I want deep down is freedom. Freedom to choose who I am, what I do, and who I share my life with. But the constant pressure has always made me feel that everything is beyond my reach." Valentina feels a tightness in her chest when she hears this, recognizing that even with all his power and influence, Tomas carries a silent weight that prevents him from freeing himself. His image begins to transform in her eyes, revealing a man who, despite his firm posture, is searching for something he hasn't yet found. After the conversation, they return to the group, and Valentina notices that their complicity is growing stronger. Next to Tomas, she feels a genuine warmth, a connection that transcends acting and reveals a growing bond. He introduces her to his family with a softer tone, as if each word carries an affection that goes beyond the requirements of the contract. At the end of the afternoon, Tomas accompanies her to the gate, where they exchange a look that expresses more than any words could. His hand holds hers for a moment longer, and Valentina feels her heart speed up. For a moment, a deep silence settles between them, and she realizes that something is developing there, a subtle promise and an attraction that resists all rationality. "Thank you for today. Your presence makes all this easier to bear," he admits, in a tone that carries an unusual vulnerability. Valentina responds with a smile, aware that something between the two of them goes beyond the role they play. With each new meeting, the barrier between the professional and the personal dissolves, and they both realize that their feelings are beginning to blend with their formal commitments. As they say goodbye, Tomas stares at her for a few seconds before finally walking away. On the way home, Valentina reflects on the day and her growing closeness to Tomas. The weight of his words resonates in her mind, and she realizes that the feeling that arises with each new encounter defies the logic of the agreement. As she closes the door to her apartment, she stares at her reflection in the mirror and wonders what she really feels and how to deal with the whirlwind of emotions that is beginning to form. Over the next few days, Valentina meets up with Tomas again to go over the next event. Both maintain the necessary seriousness, but she notices that the glances between them lengthen and that, increasingly, the distance they maintained at the beginning seems to disappear. Their conversations deepen and their mutual understanding grows, creating a bond that goes beyond words. When the meeting is over, Tomas accompanies her to the door of the mansion. Before they say goodbye, he hesitates, as if he has something important to say, but restrains himself, only giving her one last intense look. Valentina arrives at the mansion for the next event, knowing that the evening will bring new challenges. This time, the event involves a formal meeting between Tomas' family and business partners, an occasion that demands an even greater degree of closeness between them. When he sees her enter the hall, he approaches her, greeting her with a light touch on the arm, a discreet gesture that suggests a connection beyond the requirements of the contract. Valentina follows him, feeling the weight of every glance directed at them. Among the guests, she notices Mercedes watching them from afar, and the matriarch's gaze makes it clear that mistrust still remains. Mercedes approaches them both with a firm posture, and when she reaches their side, she gives Tomas a short smile before turning her attention to Valentina. "Valentina, I hope you understand the role you play in this family," says Mercedes, her tone a mixture of formality and a hint of evaluation. Valentina keeps her gaze steady, striving to respond in a confident manner, without showing the nervousness that the presence of the matriarch provokes. "Mrs. Mercedes, I take my role seriously and with respect," she says without hesitation. Mercedes looks at her for a few moments, as if measuring every word. Tomas, sensing the tense atmosphere, intervenes, holding Valentina's hand in a subtle but protective gesture. "Grandma, Valentina and I understand the importance of our decision," he says, with a tone that puts an end to any questioning. Mercedes nods, but her gaze on Valentina remains incisive, as if she were still trying to discover something beyond the surface. After another moment of silence, the matriarch moves away, and Tomas lets out a short sigh, keeping her hand between his for a moment longer before letting go. Valentina feels the tension ease and exchanges a look of complicity with Tomas. His touch reassures her, and the evening continues with both of them circulating around the hall, interacting with the guests and maintaining the image of a perfectly aligned couple. At various moments, Tomas's words and Valentina's discreet smiles complement each other, and the complicity between the two seems more and more natural. She feels that the barrier that existed before is slowly dissolving, leaving room for a more sincere connection. In between conversations, Tomas leads her to a less busy corner of the room, where he takes the opportunity to compliment her on her attitude towards Mercedes. "Your response was perfect. You handled the situation with a firmness that few others could manage," he comments, with a discreet but approving smile. Valentina thanks him, feeling that with every compliment, the bond between the two of them grows stronger. What once seemed like a contractual obligation now seems to acquire a depth that they are both beginning to recognize, even if they don't openly admit it. However, while they are talking, one of Tomas's partners approaches with an expression that shows curiosity. "Tomas, I see you're accompanied by a lovely lady," the partner comments, casting a glance at Valentina. "You seem very close. I really admire what you've built together." Tomas exchanges a glance with Valentina before replying, and the smile that appears on his face indicates that he himself recognizes the naturalness with which their relationship is developing. "Valentina is indeed a special presence. She has brought a balance that I didn't think was possible," he replies, his tone sincere. Valentina feels her heart race at his words, but remains calm. Tomas's partner nods in approval, and after a few more words, walks away, leaving them alone again. Tomas watches her expression, as if trying to understand the effect of his own words. The evening progresses, and they continue to walk around the room, always attentive to every interaction. At one point, Tomas leads her to an outside balcony where the two of them can enjoy a few minutes of privacy. The night breeze brings a welcome coolness, and Valentina takes the opportunity to relax, feeling the weight of the day dissipate for a moment. Tomas watches her in silence, and the look he casts at her carries an intensity that Valentina begins to recognize as something more than mere formality. He seems about to say something important, but hesitates, looking away towards the horizon. She feels the tension building between them, a sense of expectation that lingers in the air, laden with unspoken meanings. "I've been thinking," he begins, in a low tone, without finishing the sentence. Valentina waits, but he doesn't continue. She decides not to press him, respecting the space he seems to need. Instead, she observes his profile, noticing the seriousness mixed with a trace of unusual vulnerability. Tomas turns towards her, and the closeness between them seems to create an almost palpable tension. "Valentina, he begins again, but his voice sounds almost hesitant. She feels her heart racing, as if something important is about to happen. But before he can finish, one of the guests approaches from the balcony, beckoning Tomas to return to the hall. He steps back, looking away, and Valentina feels the frustration of that interrupted moment. Back in the lounge, they both resume their serious posture and continue their interactions as planned. However, Valentina notices that something has changed between them, albeit in a subtle way. The glances they exchange carry a new complicity, a connection that transcends the simple fulfillment of a contract. She feels that with each new event, their relationship becomes more real, and the barrier between the professional and the personal begins to break down. At the end of the evening, when the guests begin to say goodbye, Tomas leads her out, keeping silent but with a gentle touch in his eyes. They both exchange one last smile before saying goodbye, and Valentina realizes that the gesture of farewell seems incomplete. as if they both wanted to prolong each other's presence. On returning home, Valentina reflects on the moments she shared with Tomas that night. The way he looked at her, the hesitation in his words, and the way the gestures between them became natural suggest that something new is developing, something that goes beyond the contract that initially united them. The next day, Valentina arrives at the mansion for what Tomas described as a final rehearsal before the main event of the week. From now on, he explains, every detail requires perfection, and the dynamic between them needs to seem completely natural. She listens attentively, aware of the responsibility this brings. Tomas, for his part, shows a controlled calm, but Valentina notices that he looks pensive, as if something is troubling him. He conducts the rehearsal with attention to the smallest detail, from the tone of voice she should adopt to the gestures of subtle affection that the guests expect to see. He approaches her and tells her to hold his hand while they talk, and Valentina notices that the closeness awakens a new tension between them. Tomas watches her reactions carefully, and Valentina senses that his gaze carries more than just the expectation of a convincing performance. At one point, he holds her hand for longer than necessary, without saying anything. The silence between them grows, and Valentina feels her heart racing. Something in Tomas's eyes suggests that he wants to express something beyond the rehearsal, but he quickly pulls back, resuming his professional tone. "We need to practice a few more times before the event," he says, looking away. Valentina nods, but the intensity of that brief moment persists, like an undisclosed promise. For the rest of the rehearsal, they both follow the instructions in silence, but the atmosphere is charged with a perceptible tension, a tension that makes every interaction between them more meaningful. When the rehearsal is over, Tomas invites her for a walk in the garden. Valentina accepts, and they walk along the carefully landscaped paths in comfortable silence. He seems less formal, and she notices that behind his controlled expression, something in Tomas yearns for freedom, for a moment of authenticity. Valentina, for her part, realizes that the feeling between the two of them is beginning to go beyond the limits of the contract. The weight of responsibility still remains, but something else emerges there, a desire to get to know each other beyond the masks. As they stop in a far corner, he watches her with intensity and finally breaks the silence. "You know, Valentina, I really didn't expect something like this to happen. The deal, the events, it was all supposed to be an act. But now, when I look at you, I realize that perhaps my life needed someone to bring that balance." Valentina feels the impact of his words and for a moment doesn't know how to respond. Her heart beats faster, and the closeness between the two of them seems to make them vulnerable, as if they were sharing a secret that no one else would understand. She allows herself a slight smile, although she doesn't look away from him. "I didn't imagine this experience would bring anything real either. At first, I saw it all as a way of fulfilling a role and helping my family. But now, maybe there's something more. Something that goes beyond what we agreed." Tomas watches her for a few more seconds, and the silence between them seems full of meaning, loaded with silent promises. He moves closer, and his face is just a few centimeters from hers. Valentina feels her breathing quicken, and in that instant, the tension between them breaks down in a kiss that is light but full of sincerity. The softness of the gesture reveals an intensity that they had both been avoiding, but which, at that moment, they can no longer contain. When they part, they both remain silent, still under the impact of what has just happened. Tomas keeps his gaze fixed on hers, and Valentina feels that something new and undeniable has emerged between them. He takes a deep breath, as if regaining control, and gives her a subtle smile. "I think we've crossed a line," he says, with a tone that mixes lightness and seriousness. Valentina agrees, feeling that the bond between them has now taken on an unexpected depth. The two continue walking, but the atmosphere between them has changed, making every gesture and glance a reflection of that new intimacy. At the end of the walk, Tomas accompanies her to the exit of the mansion, where they say goodbye with a smile that suggests a silent understanding. On returning home, Valentina reflects on what has happened and what it means. The barriers that separated them fade, and she allows herself to imagine a future with him, something that goes beyond the contract. For the first time, she questions how she really feels about Thomas and how he feels about her. Doubt, however, soon gives way to a quiet conviction. Something genuine and deep is born between them, something that goes beyond any agreement. On the day of the event, Valentina arrives with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. When he meets her, Tomas greets her with a smile that carries a new confidence, as if they both share a secret that only they understand. He leads her into the hall where the event is taking place, and the two of them move among the guests with the same naturalness, but something between them is now expressed more lightly, as if each gesture of affection were authentic. Between one greeting and another, Tomas turns to her and holds her hand firmly, a gesture that seems intentionally affectionate. Valentina senses that for him, the touch represents more than a formality, and the realization of this reassures her. With the reassurance he gives her, she begins to look at the guests with unshakable confidence. Mercedes watches them from afar, but Valentina notices that the matriarch's gaze no longer carries the same mistrust. As she approaches, Mercedes flashes a restrained smile, and this time, her words sound different. "Tomas, Valentina, it seems I've finally found in you what I've always hoped for in this family," comments Mercedes in a tone that mixes approval and recognition. Tomas thanks her with a respectful nod, and Valentina feels a sense of satisfaction when she realizes that her performance has earned the matriarch's respect. When Mercedes walks away, Tomas looks at her and smiles, as if recognizing the effort they both made to reach that moment. "You did it, Valentina. Even in the face of doubts, you did it," he says with sincere admiration. Valentina smiles back, and the two exchange a look full of understanding. The evening progresses, and they remain together, sharing each other's company in an authentic way. Every word and gesture between them reflects a connection that grows with time, something that transcends any obligation. At the end of the event, Tomas leads her to a more secluded corner of the room, where the two of them finally allow themselves to relax. He approaches her and holds her hands, as if to make his feelings clear. His gaze conveys a sincerity that Valentina hadn't expected to see, and for a moment, they both remain silent. "I don't think I can ignore my feelings any longer," he confesses in a tone that carries a new lightness and affection. Valentina feels an unexpected happiness, and the two of them move closer once again, sharing a kiss that seals the promise that now exists between them. The weight of the contract disappears, and the complicity between the two acquires a depth that they both recognize as true. The next morning, Valentina wakes up thinking about recent events and the transformation of what began as a formal contract into something that now carries deep feelings. The memories of last night and the kiss with Tomas come vividly to mind, bringing a mixture of joy and uncertainty. She knows that over the course of their meetings, the gestures between them have crossed the line of agreement, but something inside her still resists, admitting the depth of that bond. Arriving at the mansion for another round of preparations, Valentina senses a different atmosphere when she greets Tomas. He welcomes her with a quiet smile, and as they look at each other, they both recognize that something has changed. He leads her into the main hall, where they settle down to discuss the last event of the contract. However, the silence between the two seems to fill the room, as if they both want to discuss what they really feel, but are hesitant to give voice to their thoughts. "Valentina," he begins, his tone softer than usual. "We need to talk about what's happening between us." She takes a deep breath, aware that this is an important moment. The desire to confess her feelings is mixed with the fear of facing the uncertainties of the future. "Thomas, I don't know how all this happened, but what I'm feeling now has nothing to do with the contract we signed," she admits, feeling a mixture of relief and nervousness at revealing her feelings. He watches her in silence, and the look on his face reveals an understanding that calms her insecurities. Holding her hand, Thomas approaches her carefully, as if he wanted to confirm the intensity of that feeling. "Nor does what I feel have anything to do with any agreement. With you, I found something I didn't know I was looking for, something that transforms what at first was just a temporary commitment into something I want to preserve," he replies, his tone carrying a serene sincerity. Valentina feels her heart warm at his words, and for a moment they both remain silent, sharing what has become a true connection. However, the idea of moving forward with these feelings makes her think of the possibility that reality could interrupt that moment, a thought she can't ignore. "But what do we do now?" she finally asks, her gaze fixed on his. Thomas reflects, and the seriousness in his countenance indicates that he is considering the options carefully. "I know it won't be easy, but I want to find a way to turn what we have into something solid. We need to face my family and, above all, Mercedes. That's the next step," he says, with a determination that reinforces his commitment to the decision. Valentina recognizes the difficulty of that decision, but feels that the desire to continue by his side is stronger than any obstacle. The look they share seals their promise to fight together, despite the uncertainties and external expectations. At the end of the conversation, they both prepare for the family dinner that will take place that evening, aware that the meeting will bring challenges and will require all their firmness and sincerity. Later, as the guests gather in the hall, Valentina and Thomas enter the space side by side with a determined attitude. He holds her close, and they exchange glances of mutual support as they greet the family. Mercedes approaches with her usual serious countenance, and Valentina feels the weight of the matriarch's presence as an inevitable challenge. However, Thomas seems more confident, as if he has decided to face Mercedes' demands with determination. "So I see you're still together, Thomas, and I assume that this now involves a commitment beyond the contract?" Mercedes asks, in a tone that mixes curiosity and skepticism. Thomas faces his grandmother firmly and without hesitation replies, "Yes, Mercedes. What I have with Valentina has become something I want to preserve. I thank you and the other family members for everything, but the time has come to choose my own happiness." Mercedes looks at her grandson with an inscrutable expression, but Valentina realizes that Thomas's response surprises her. He takes her by the hand, and the gesture conveys a clear sign of commitment. The matriarch remains silent for a few seconds before nodding, and, to Valentina's surprise, she flashes a slight smile. "If you have truly found your happiness, Thomas, who am I to stop you? But you should know that my approval depends on your decision being sound and not just impulsive," says Mercedes with a warning tone. Valentina thanks her with a smile, and Thomas wraps his arm around her, conveying a comforting security. Seeing the positive outcome of the conversation with Mercedes, he feels that the bond between the two of them has now taken on a legitimacy that seemed distant before. The rest of the evening goes more smoothly, and both allow themselves to interact with the guests in an authentic way, like a couple who have really chosen to be together. At the end of dinner, Tomas accompanies her to the garden, where they both watch the starry sky in silence, enjoying a moment of tranquility after the challenges of the day. He takes her hand and with a serene smile confesses, "I never imagined that a contract could lead me to this. But I know that with you by my side, my life will take on a meaning I never expected to find." Valentina feels the weight of his words and with a genuine smile holds his hand tightly, conveying the certainty of the commitment they are making together. "Tomas, I don't know what the future holds for us, but I do know that by your side, I'll find the strength to face anything," she replies, her tone reflecting her determination and affection. The two exchange a look that seals their promise to face whatever comes, strengthened by their complicity and the love that has now become a reality. Over the following weeks, Valentina and Tomas consolidate their relationship with a mixture of calm and intensity, now free from the constraints of the contract. Their relationship grows stronger, and they both experience a peaceful routine, sharing little moments that reveal the sincere affection and partnership that has developed. At Tomas's side, Valentina feels a peace she never imagined possible, and he, in turn, seems lighter, free of the rigidity that once dominated his every gesture. With each new day, the two of them explore the city, discovering places together that mean more than just landscapes. They walk through gardens, enjoy museums, and share simple meals that, for some reason, take on a special value. Their closeness is reflected in affectionate gestures, glances that communicate without words, and a complicity that overflows in small interactions. For both of them, life next to each other seems like a solid and serene construction, marked by respect and the freedom to be who they really want to be. One sunny afternoon, Tomas invites Valentina for a walk in the mansion's garden, where fresh flowers adorn the stone paths. He seems to have a special purpose at that moment, something she soon senses from his serious yet affectionate tone. They walk in silence for a while, until he stops in front of an ornate fountain, where the water reflects the sunlight in a soft glow. Tomas turns to her, holding her hands tightly. "Valentina, by your side, I have rediscovered what it means to live fully. I never imagined that I would meet someone who would transform my life so completely. I want to build a future with you, not by contract, but by choice," he declares, with a sincere gleam in his eye. She feels her heart race as she hears his words, and an emotional smile appears on her face. The feeling that this moment is sealing a new chapter for both of them brings her an indescribable peace. Without hesitation, she replies with the same certainty and sincerity, "Tomas, I can't imagine a future without you. I want to be by your side, because I know that together we will find something rare and true." The two embrace, and the silence around them seems to bless their mutual promise. From that moment on, they both know that the story they started together has evolved into something that goes beyond an agreement. They now share a life built on genuine feelings and a solid commitment. Mercedes, watching from afar, gives a smile of approval, as if finally accepting her grandson's new path and the choice he has made. In the days that follow, Tomas and Valentina begin to prepare a new stage for their life together. They make decisions about the direction of their careers, considering the balance between their personal lives and their professional commitments. Tomas adjusts his business responsibilities, allowing himself a routine that includes more time with Valentina and activities they both enjoy. Valentina, for her part, feels supported in her desire to explore new projects and, with his encouragement, begins to develop plans of her own. Over time, their relationship grows stronger and they face every challenge together based on the mutual trust and respect they have built up. As they look to the future, they both realize that life alongside each other becomes more than a choice. It's a source of joy and stability that motivates them to evolve together.